Yeah, okay, so as it turns out, here in America, this is the week of Thanksgiving. In fact, in 2 days, yeah, this is Tuesday, so in 2 days, it's going to be Thanksgiving. This is where the chaos happens. Everybody's trying to figure out, do I have this? Do I have this? Do I have me personally, I can't believe that we're already at Thanksgiving. It's this year has flown. I feel like I say that every year. This year has flown by. But what I want to talk about is a tradition that has drifted. I mean, we don't do this anymore. In fact, it kind of morphed into Halloween, pretty much did. And when people see a lot of these pictures, they think that they're Halloween pictures. They're not. They're actually Thanksgiving for Thanksgiving. When I was doing research on this, this particular tradition was extremely popular. Now, there were people that when they were researching it for their blogs and articles and everything, said that this was only in big cities like New York and Chicago. No, I'm going to have to say that's not true because when I was doing my research, I found where small cities here in Washington State and in other small cities all over in the US were celebrating. So it's not just in New York. However, New York big time celebrated this. So let's just jump into this. Now, first, I want to do a quick, brief history on Thanksgiving holiday here in Washington State. No, here in the US. Too many words in my brain. No, so as it turns out, after the big feast that happened in the 1600s, people were still commemorating that feast, founding fathers and that kind of thing. It was still celebrated, but it was not an official holiday. No. We have a woman by the name of Sarah Josepha Hale to thank. She was pushing for that, uh, for the official holiday to happen. Uh, in fact, she is also, I have her up here. She was the author of a nursery rhyme known as Mary Had a Little Lamb. And she is a writer and she's done a lot of things, did. And she helped the completion of the Bunker Hill Monument. And so very accomplished lady. But when it came to Thanksgiving, she was for several years. It varies on the exact years. I've seen 20 years, I've seen 40 years, so it depends. But for several years, she was contacting politicians that we need to make this an official holiday, the holiday of Thanksgiving, and of what happened in the 1600s. And it turns out that Abraham Lincoln was the one that said, "Yes, we do. We do need to do this." And the funny thing about it is that he decided to make it official during the Civil War. 1863 is when he decided. In fact, he made a proclamation about it. And but the thing is that it kind of got delayed because here in America, now our Civil War lasted. It started in 1861 and then ended, I believe, in 1865. I'll correct myself in the description box. But so after the Civil War, there was a Reconstruction era because, of course, it's like worst war in history for us. And so there was a Reconstruction period after that. And the holiday wasn't truly officiated until the 1870s. And yeah, Abraham Lincoln made a proclamation. And look, I love the guy, but he got really wordy with his speeches. I mean, the Gettysburg Address, I remember having to recite the Gettysburg Address, and it was, I was getting bored having to recite it. And important speech, not gonna lie, it's one of the most important speeches in our history, but it's long. I, I respect Abraham Lincoln, I really do. But with a lot of his speeches, they are very long. This one is no different. There's a lot to say simply for saying I officiate this known as yeah, just going to make it official. So that's a brief history into our holiday known as Thanksgiving, because I know that other countries celebrate Thanksgiving. Now, the tradition that lasted from about the 1870s, because I was looking in on newspaper articles and pretty much started in the 1870s into about the 20s, probably officially fizzled out by the 1930s, because here in America, we had the stock market crash, and that was when the Great Depression started. And and that pretty much killed everything. When people have no money, yeah, that pretty much does it. So this tradition is called Thanksgiving masking. Well, what is that? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory. Paper mache masks. These were sold in stores, or you could make them. And you wore these paper mache masks, and you would wear costumes, and you would dress. Usually, the dress attire was like of hobos, or the boys would dress as girls. Uh, Kids would dress like the word was basically ragamuffins. They would dress as or there were kids that would dress as their parents. The parents, like the husband would dress as the wife would dress as, because the parents would get in it as well, as everybody was getting into it. This was everybody, not just for the kids, but the kids loved it the most, and I'll get into that. And they would carry baskets, and they would go around the neighborhood. They would also go down the streets and into businesses such as, the candy shops, the butcher shops, and bakers and all that. And they would ask for things such as like fruits and vegetables, bread like rolls, that kind of thing, pies, candy, jams, jellies, even turkeys. They would take a turkey home. And now, the point of all this, the symbolism behind all this is to symbolize the bounty at Thanksgiving. There was also um, where pennies were thrown. The parents would have these pennies and they would throw them everywhere, and the kids would scramble for them. A lot like, think of uh, kids that when they would break a piñata and kids scramble over. Oh, I've been to several parties where somebody had a piñata. I always wanted a piñata and I never got one. Never had a piñata. I missed out. But when the piñata would break, then you saw kids from everywhere. That's pretty much what it's like. You see these pictures and you see kids just scrambling everywhere to get these pennies. And it's kind of like, I don't know how it is for other places, but we have a 4th of July parade. And if you're in the parade, you're encouraged to throw candy at the kids. And that are standing and watching the parade. And now, how popular was it exactly? I mean, okay, so they're going around and asking for these, they would have these Thanksgiving masking balls. and parties. And I mean, I saw newspaper articles saying that there was a Thanksgiving ball, there was a Thanksgiving masking party, Thanksgiving masking, be there. And and there were these in New York especially. Okay, New York, they had what was called what's funny is that Thanksgiving became Ragamuffin Day. And they would have these parades. They were the Ragamuffin parades. And so Thanksgiving, they pretty much had a Thanksgiving, the Macy's Day Parade before Macy's even was a thing. And so, and there were tons of church services. They would try to have the church service before you know, that's a thing for Christmas too. But, you know, I, these days they don't have church services for Thanksgiving. I mean, I understand it. You know, I grew up in a Christian home, and I kind of understand the connection there. But boy, there were a lot of church services, and for Thanksgiving. And nowadays, it's just football and gorging yourself on food. I do that. It's I enjoy the food. I really do. And now I did see, and again, I'm not. Because I wanted to make sure it wasn't just New York. Because New York, I got to be honest, even back then, kids got rowdy. They did. There were instances where the police had to break up the parade, so it didn't get to finish because the kids got rowdy. The air quote ragamuffins got rowdy. So the parade didn't get to end. The police had to get involved and it stopped. There was also a one article, I don't think I saved it, but there was a an incident where a girl got kidnapped. There was like this drunk that was wandering around and kidnapped this girl during the Ragamuffin parade. Now, of course, that's not the kids' fault that, you know, that we're doing the parade or anything like that. So there were things like that going on. And I don't think that was in New York. I think that was in some, you know, like St. Louis or something like that. But so there were these instances that were happening, and you know, it's unfortunate that these things happened. And so and that's the unfortunate thing right there is that over time the maskers went from gathering bounty, you know, going to the neighborhoods, going into businesses and that kind of thing, to basically pulling pranks. You know, they would dress up and become unknowns and pulling pranks. And it was just it ruined the whole merriment of it. And yeah, by the 1930, I think that was the last article I saw that it was over. It was done, you know, and it makes sense because with the stock market crashed, why would you want to do that? You know, you didn't have the money to buy the supplies for paper mache. And so, and plus, you know, given what was happening, I fully understand that. And, you know, when I was doing my research on this, it took me back because I worked retail. And when I worked retail, it was in the mall. I was like, every job, I was a mall rat. Okay, let's just be. And every Halloween, we were expected to, in the mall, when it became Halloween, we had to dress up. That was the policy. It didn't matter if you wanted to or not. You had to dress up because what they did is they had a special with the kids where they could come into the stores and we handed out candy for the kids. So the kids could come to the store and talk to each individual um, associate and get candy. It was fun. It was absolutely fun. And we would make it fun for them because I remember talking to the kids and I would say, well, if you can guess who I am, I'll give you an extra piece of candy. And and so we did stuff like that for them. And we would also have we would close early on Halloween and set everything up for a haunted house or a haunted mansion kind of a thing. One of the stores would be set up for that. And we would get paid extra if we did that. I did that one year and just a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Community stuff, a lot of fun. And so when I was doing the research for this, it reminded me of that and a lot of fun memories. And I wish that stuff like this happened again. And keep out the changing it to pranks, kids will be kids. I understand that. I fully do, kids are going to do that, but but don't ruin it for everybody. Come on now. And yeah, because especially with the parade, the parades have been going on for quite some time. I think the parade one was like in 1911, and the parades have been going on since the 1800s. And yeah, there was one where the permits, they didn't quite get all the permits for the parade. And so the parade didn't happen one year. I don't remember where that was. I think it was somewhere in California somewhere. And but so now a quick note here before I close up is this is something that came to mind as I was looking around is that this is the difference between these Thanksgiving maskers and Halloween costumes. Because Halloween costumes in the Victorian era consisted of like witches and cats and bats. Bats were very popular. Witches and bats more than anything else. And you had the skeletons and then of course the pumpkin heads. And I've seen several of those pumpkin heads, yes. And there were none of those. There are none of those. I mean, these kids are dressed like hobos. They're dressed like their parents. The boys are dressed as girls. And and they have the dirt rubbed on their face and everything. Yeah, they have the face paint. Not all of them have the paper mache uh things. And they look scary to us now. It's like, well, these are creepy looking. Well, they're paper mache. I mean, paper mache is not easy to work with. Okay. I'm sure it really was not easy to work with back then. Okay. Just let's have an understanding of that. So, given that these are not Halloween, I mean, I fell into the trap. I was like, well, these are Halloween. And then as you start thinking about it, it's like, wait a minute, these aren't witches. There's no cat costume, bat costume, anything. I mean, as you go further down, like in 1911 and into the 1920s, that's where the cat costumes started to show up and the skeleton costumes started to show up. And yeah, there's no pumpkin heads or anything like that. And there are a few of the Frankenstein that show up. Every, none of those. So I'm not sure how we just decided that these are Halloween. We're just weird like that. Me included, because I did. I thought that it was, and so I'm in that boat with everybody else. But anyway, so in closing, uh, this was a tradition that started when Thanksgiving became an official holiday, which we have uh, Sarah Hale and um, President Lincoln to thank for that, for the football and turkey day. That's pretty much what it has become now. Of course, I did see somewhere that football started like at the turn of the century. So with was associated with. Anyway, that's a whole other video all on its own. But it was a very popular Thanksgiving masking was a very popular tradition back in the day. Uh, Kids and adults would dress up. They had the dances. they had the parties and just fun. Okay, bring it back. I'm I'm sorry, but I'm like this big community oriented person. I love going to things and interacting with people, and that seems like a big community oriented. I feel like the digital age has destroyed that. And so, because I don't like talking to robots. I really don't. I just want to be around people. So that's why I say that. But but anyway, this was a tradition that fizzled out, especially in the 30s, I've said before, and it makes sense. It makes perfect sense why. Originally, I thought that it had died out when World War One ended. I didn't think that it lasted through the 20s, but I was seeing evidence that it was still going on in the 20s, not as much as before, like through the teens. And but anyway, that's Thanksgiving masking. I'll end up here. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving.